All right. This was my character I was texting earlier. Yay. I'm happy with her. Staring into your soul. Okay. Okay. So we have our IK stuff and we have our FK stuff, and it's all set up and working. This does this thing. This works like that. And my FK stuff works like that. We'll lock it down later, but it all works. Even our forearm twist on IK. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to bring back my skinned skeleton. I'm going to move my IK handle. Again, you want to make sure that this is frozen transformation so that when I move it away, if I want to move it back, all I have to do is zero out my translates and it's done. Right? Okay. That's very important at this point for the IK, right? For the FK, you want to take the shoulder and you want to just rotate it out of position, right? This is, again, must be frozen transformations. Otherwise, when you zero it out, it's not going to go back to the default, right? Okay. So I'm doing this just for the sake of being able to see my skinned joint system. Again, there's that, it's skinned. So what I'm going to do, as I said before, is I'm going to apply an orient constraint from the IK joint system to the skin and from the FK joint system to the skin. And then we're simply going to set driven key to switch between the two. So I usually start from the outside in. So I usually start from the outside in, and even though the palm doesn't technically have any effect on the skin, and I'm sharing, I'm recording, okay, all right, just making sure everything's going. Even though the palm doesn't technically have anything to do with position of things and stuff like that, right? I'm going to do it from the palm to the shoulder, and I usually do it again from the outside in, and the reason for this is because it's easier to select these objects. I can always shift select all three of these palm joints and hit F, show them in the list, right? So that I can select them there should I lose my place or something like that, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, use the controlling joint system. I'm going to hide my IK handles just for the sake of, because they take selection precedence over over joints. I'm going to start from the palm, the controlling joint to the skinned joint. I'm going to go to my rigging menu set, and I'm going to do constrain orient. In this case, I want to open up the options, and I want all axes. Again, always check that. I do not want to maintain offset. Okay, I want it to move to be in place with where this joint is. Okay, so I'm just going to click add, and you should see a little bit of a shift as the palm joint orients itself to the direction that this palm joint is going. And then I'll do the next one up. That's the wrist. There's the wrist. At the palm. Yeah, sorry. There's the wrist. There's the wrist. Okay. I've already applied my orient constraint once, so I'm going to hit G to apply it again. You should see a little bit of a shift. Forearm to forearm. Hit G. There you should see a lot of a shift, right? Because the forearm is facing a completely different direction, right? Elbow 3 to elbow 3. Hit G. Shift. Elbow 2 to elbow 2. G. Elbow 1 to elbow 1. G. And on the shoulder, it should be completely in line, just like that, right? If we did this first, it would be a lot harder to select these as we go, right? So now, the other direction, same thing, FK. From FK, and I'm just going to do this in here, right? Because it's a lot harder to select now that they're overlapping. I could always hide my IK arm, right? I could always take the visibility off of that, but I'm just going to do it from here. So from the palm, control click the palm. I'm going to hit G again. That's going to show a little bit of a shift. From the wrist to the wrist, I'm hitting control click, hit G again. It's going to shift. Forearm to forearm, G. Elbow 3, G. Elbow 2, G. Elbow 1, G. And shoulder to shoulder, G. So now what I should have is a direct 50% between the IK joint system and the FK joint system. If I rotate the FK joints, you'll see that it's constantly halfway between those, right? If I move this around, it's constantly halfway between those, every single joint, right? So if I zero this out, and I zero out the rotation of my shoulder, it should align again. And every single one of these skinned joints has a single constraint with two different weighted elements, attributes attached to it, right? The wrist, IK, and the wrist, FK, right? And again, if I take this out here and I go to, I'll just do the shoulder. If I turn off the IK weight, set it to 0, the joint system will completely be controlled by the FK joint. If I turn on the IK and turn off the FK, it's 100% controlled by the IK joint, okay? So this is what we're going to control with our IK-FK switch attribute, which we have not created yet. So I'm going to zero that out again. And since I did all that stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and save version 30. I need to create an IK-FK switch attribute. So select my hand control. This is where we're going to have that control, that attribute. And I'm going to go to Edit, Add Attribute in the channel box. Not this edit up here. It's not up there. And I'm just going to call it IK, FK, switch. I'm going to override nice name, make sure that the underscores are there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as a float. And usually when I do this, I like to have some level of control between my switches, right? Some blending. So I'm going to do a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 10 with the default being 1. Usually what I'll do is, you know, IK is 1, FK is 10. That's how I usually do it. So click OK. Now I have the attribute. And now what I need to do is I need to control with that attribute these weights on all of these constraints that I just created. All right, so this is where my set-driven key comes in. And again, y'all have done set-driven key. This shouldn't be new. It's just more, right? It's about paying attention to exactly what you're doing and making sure that you do it on all of them, right? It's more about attention to detail than it is about something new. It's not a new technique. We just have to make sure that every single one of these is done and done in the right direction, that I'm not placing an orient constraint the wrong way. I had some in a couple of rigs, I had joints that were left behind because they had orient constrained the control to the joint instead of the joint to the control. Know what I mean? So the joints, when the spine was rotated, the hand would stay in place, right? Or the neck would be left behind, or whatever, right? Okay, so it's about making sure that you're doing things the right direction, choosing the right thing first, and then what's being controlled second for every single joint, and testing it and making sure that it works. If it doesn't work, undo it, go back and make sure that you did it the right direction. Does that make sense? You look confused, Dave. Okay. All right. All right. So I have the attribute, and this is going to control it. So this is going to be under animation menu set because we're dealing with keys. So key, set driven key, set just like we've done in the past. Our controller is the hand control, so I'm going to load that as the driver. There's my switch attribute. Now, all of these, I think, can be set at the same time. I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to hit load driven. And they're all, actually, they can be loaded at the same time, but we can apply them, we'll have to apply them individually, right? All right, so the default on this is 1, which is IK, right? That's the first thing that we stated on our control. So it goes from IK to FK from 1 to 10, right? So it's set at 1, which means that it should have IK turned on. Right now, they're set to both, right? So in order to turn IK on, I need to turn FK off because it's already on. IK is already on. So I just go through each of these orient constraints where it says FK, and I hit 0. Just turning them all off, one at a time. So I've turned my FK off. I'm just going to go ahead and test position of my IK. There it is. And if you want to look at it with Geo, there it is. Works. Okay, it's all on IK. So now that these are all set only to IK, I can highlight my first constraint, and we're going to highlight both of these weights. Whereas previously we were highlighting only one object, one attribute. In this case, the switch is controlling the weighting of both of these, right? Okay, so I'm going to key that one, go to the second one, highlight both, key it, go to the third one, highlight both, key it. Just go down the list. Key, highlight both, key, highlight both, key, highlight both, key. Okay, so now both of these attributes on every single one of these constraints is controlled and keyed. So now I go back to the hand controller. I take my IKFK switch to 10, right? That's where I set my maximum. And then I go back in and I change these. I go to the first orient constraint. I set 1 to 0 and 0 to 1. If I hit 0 and hit tab and hit 1 and hit enter, that will do it. I go to the second one. 0 dash or tab 1, enter. Third one. 0 tab 1, enter. Fourth one. 0 tab 1, enter. Fifth one. 0 tab 1, enter. You can click and type, you know. I can go like this, and then I can go here, you know, stuff like that, right? I'm just showing you the fast, efficient way of doing it. So all of these now, if I click through each of these constraints, IK is off, FK is on, right? 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. And also, just to let you know, if for some reason you applied on one of these joints, maybe you missed creating the orient constraint and you created the FK constraint first, it's going to be first in the list, right? So make sure that you're turning on the right thing and go by the naming convention, not necessarily just the order that you did it. If you know you did it in the right order, like I did, right? Then, you know, you can just hit 0 tab 1 and it's fine. If you missed it and you did the IK orient constraint first, or excuse me, second, then this will be 1, 0 instead. You don't have to undo it. You don't have to delete it. You just have to make sure that you're setting your keys properly. You know what I mean? Okay. So I'm going to go through each of these. My switch is set to 10. My constraints are set properly. I'm going to highlight both again and hit key. Go to the next one, highlight both, hit key. Next one, highlight both, key. Next one, highlight both, key. Just all the way down the line. Now, I have all of those done. Now, if I select my switch and I middle click and drag somewhere in here, it switches between the two different types of controls. I have full IK control here. I can rotate it. I select my hand, go back to FK. I have full FK control here. And it all works. Right? Sometimes people will have like crazy flipping that goes on. It shouldn't do that. If you follow these steps properly, it shouldn't do some crazy blah. You know, it shouldn't do that. That means probably you had some transformations that you didn't freeze, or you had rotations on your joints that weren't frozen, things like that, right? When I set all of my translate and rotate to 0, should pop back there. If I select all 3 of my FK controls, set my rotate back to 0, should be right back in line. I didn't technically test that, but that works also. So that's the switch. I'm going to save as because I don't want to have to do that again. Version 31. Now, even though this works, my hand control should follow my hand everywhere it goes, whether it's in IK or FK. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to parent constrain it to either the palm joint or the finger connect joint. Either one of these will be fine. I usually do it to the palm joint. So I'm going to select my palm joint, shift select my hand control, go back to rigging, constrain, parent, options, all attributes, maintain offset in this case, add. And now when I move my hand and when I do my switch, the control goes with it. Now, we're getting close. Oh, did I not? I didn't set up my clavicle controls. I thought I did that. Okay. All right. I forgot to create my clavicle controls when I initially laid out my controls. So I'm going to import those back in, or I'll reference them. Get my controls back in here. Because I forgot to create those. And I'm going to use this control right here, similar to the feet. It's up to you as to what control you want. I'm going to duplicate that again because we're creating it as a part of the scene, not a reference thing. Rotate that -90. Definitely want to scale it down a lot. I'm going to scale it like this. And I'm going to hold down D and center my control because I like it in the middle of that, just like before. I'm going to go to my front view and see where this is. As far as alignment is concerned, I think that's okay. And I'm going to leave that right there. Now, I want to name this clavicle R CTRL. I want to freeze transformations. This part is very important on this clavicle control. Make sure you freeze transformations. And I'm going to duplicate this over to the other side. So the easiest way for me to do that without having to get it aligned and all that junk is I'll group it, duplicate the group, scale the group -1 on X. And there it is. Unparent it, get rid of the groups. Freeze transformations. So this one is clavicle L. I noticed on a few of your submitted assignments that when you duplicated objects, you didn't switch between right and left with your naming conventions. So make sure that you check those and also get rid of any numbering at the end of the CTRL and JNT and all that stuff. All right, so I have these clavicle controls, and what these are going to do, yes.
You got to run after your right control.
You look. Yeah, all right. Yep, you're right.
Just
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad you told me that. I would have found it eventually, but yeah, you're right. And I don't need all these other controls again, so I'm just going to get rid of the reference. So file reference editor. There's my control reference. I'm just going to right click, reference, remove reference. So that gets rid of that. Now, thank you for pointing that out. So what we're going to do here is we're going to control the Z rotation of this first clavicle joint. Okay, my skinning isn't great. Don't pay attention to that, but this is how it should affect, right? So, but I'm going to set this using the connection editor. Now, how do I use the translate Y to control the rotate Z on a joint? I'm going to go to Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor. My controller is the clavicle control. So I'm going to reload left. This is what I'm going to, my outputs, what's the controlling element. I'm going to select my clavicle 1 joint, reload right, and open up my rotate. So translate Y is going to control rotate Z. So that makes the connection, but if you remember, my movement is a lot more, a lot larger than my rotation. In order to get any viable rotation, I need to do a lot more movement, right? I'm not getting a whole lot of rotation because, 90-degree rotation, I would have to move this up 90 units, right? And that's not what I want to do, right? Not that I want 90, but even 45, that's a lot of movement, right? So I need to multiply the movement of this in order to apply that to the rotation. So as I did before, I'm going to go to my node editor, Windows node editor, and I'm going to look at the connection of this clavicle control to that joint, right? If I open up the clavicle control, there's translate. If I open up the joint, there's rotate. I need a multiplier between this connection. So I hit tab, I start typing multiply. There it is. And I'm just going to open this up. My input is going to be translate Y. Again, I like to keep Y to Y, right? Even though the output is going to be Z, I like to keep it along the same lines. It really doesn't matter which one you do. You could do from there, you could do it from there, you could do it from there. It doesn't really matter, right? The output has to equal the input though, right? If I keep this, if I do this on X, I have to do X to rotate Z instead, right? I'm going to take that, I'm going to go Y, I'm going to do output Y to rotate Z. And again, even though I have that multiplier in there, the default value that it's being multiplied by is still 1. So what I need to do is I need to start typing in values under whichever one you choose that's yellow, right? So since my my middle column, X, Y, Z, right? My middle column has the yellow in it. My middle column of the lower row needs to be my multiplier. If I type in 10, test it, Is that the amount of rotation that I want? Is that good enough for me? Not really. I'm going to go a little bit farther. I'll go 20. Is this enough? Not quite. Your value is up to you, as long as it's noticeable, as long as it works good enough. This is pretty good for me. I'm happy with that amount of rotation for that amount of movement. I could take it farther if I wanted to. Right? So since that's a quick setup, I'm just going to do the other side, even though I'm not doing the total arm setup on the other side right now. I'm just going to go ahead and set up the clavicle control for this. So reload left on the control, select the joint, reload right, translate to rotate, translate Y, rotate Z. I need my node editor. My value in this case was 30. That's the value that I chose for my multiplication. So do my multiply divide. Open this up. Y to Y, output, Y to Z. Set my multiply to 30. Test it. Does it work? Yes. I obviously have some skinning issue on this side. That's surprising. Actually, I didn't expect that. So this is how this works, right? For shrugging. I'm going to go ahead and save as because, well, we have a little bit more time. So we have this. Now I need to group these controls together. This is why I did both of them already, because I do need, similar to the feet, I need to group these controls together. Control G, and I'm going to call this the clavicle group. Clavicle _ GRP. And I'm going to parent constrain the clavicle group to this sternum joint. Okay, so I select the sternum joint, control click the clavicle group, constrain, parent, again, maintain offset, all attributes. Now when I rotate my spine, the clavicle group goes with it, and I still have the ability to shrug on both sides. Always test both sides. So if you wanted to, I'm not going to do that this well. I'll show you. I have in my notes to set my translate limits because you don't technically want your clavicle to be able to, you know, go ridiculous. So you could set limits for this if you wanted to, just by selecting one of the joint or one of the controls. Go to limit information, just like we did in the past. Open up translate. Default is at 0. I can set my translate Y limit to a -1 and +1 so that it can only go so far. I could actually set my minimum to like -0.5 because really I don't need it to go super far. But, you know, so I'm just going to do that. -0.5 and maximum of 1. And I don't need translate X and translate Z So I could either lock and hide, or if I wanted to, I could actually do this through limits as well. I set my current to 0 and activate both sides so that it has a min and max of 0. I can't move it, right? It's still keyable and listed here, but it's limited, right? It can't move. I could do the same thing for translate Z so that I can't move it away from the body. It doesn't help me with this. And I get the same out of locking and hiding, right? I get the same capability. So yeah, and this should still work. So so now we only have about 4 minutes left. I'm going to save as, and we need to make the IK and FK shoulder joints and controls follow the body when we're bending the spine, and then we lock everything down, set up our hierarchy, and we'll be good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and go to break. Just come back at 11, and we'll finish this up.